Hi, this is CJ. Welcome to When the Storm Breaks Chapter 3. In this chapter, the Jeon camp pushes for higher ground as the weather closes in, only to be met by the park scouts demanding the release of their Black Swan. What will happen when the two alphas end up trapped together as the storm rages? Stick around and find out. You can help keep these audiobooks free for everyone by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/cjmoon. And you can find the original video version of this story as well as dozens more on my main channel at youtube.com/@cjmoonwrites. All links are of course also in the description. Remember, if you're watching as well as listening, hit that CC button to turn on subtitles. YouTube can auto-translate as well as auto-dub the audio from English into the language of your choice. So wrap up warm, get cozy, and enjoy the ride.
Chapter 3. What the Storm Spared. The weather held its breath while the pack began to climb. Sky the color of iron pressed low, but did not break. Ropes creaked. Men moved in lines. The evidence chest had been wrapped to keep it dry. The infirmary supplies and those injured and recovering came next. The prisoner kept in sight at all times while they moved. Jimin kept pace beside Jungkook. The rope sat loose enough to let him walk, tight enough to say what he was. Mud clung to boots and long, wet strings, footsteps squelching as they walked. Keep the central ring together, Jungkook said, voice even. Quartermasters, chest between you. No gaps. Orders rippled forward along the lines. The ridge path they followed upward narrowed to a shelf cut by roots. Pine needles laid a slick carpet. The forest smelled like wet soil and petrichor. It might be dry now, Jimin thought, but it wouldn't be for long. The warning came as a sound Jimin knew well. Not storm crack, not thunder, nor a branch breaking under its own weight. Something snapped by foot, light and quick. Jungkook did not raise his voice. On your left. Two shields swung as one. A knot of guards stepped in, shoulders touching to block their alpha in unison. Jungkook's hand closed on the rope at Jimin's wrists. Not a jerk, only a reminder as the line around them became a wall. Three cloaked shapes slid out of the trees like ghosts, eyes bright with the kind of hope that gets men killed. The one in front wore the park pack badge, turned a fraction sideways, the silent field sign for move now. He saw Jimin and a breath left him like prayer. Alpha, the scout said reverently, eyes on Jimin. We're here to escort you home. The treaty forbids detaining a diplomatic envoy in neutral ground. With respect, Jeon, release Park Jimin, or you risk breaking the terms of the treaty. A diplomatic envoy? Jungkook scoffed. I cut him out of a river gang's rope on our side of the border, and on the back of a forged dispatch that dragged us there, no less. Until we learn who wrote it and who paid for it, he stays in my custody. I'll ensure he continues to breathe and that he is not harmed. That is enough to keep the peace. Now step back. The park lieutenant grinned, but it was all teeth. You gonna make us, Jeon? He glanced down the slope where the drill square drowned in puddles. Your force looks thin up here. Jimin's pulse kicked hard. Three would never bait a Jeon squad without shadows behind them. Backup was here. He could feel it in the way the trees held their breath. He could have glanced past Jungkook's shoulder. The terrain wasn't easy. Slick, narrow path littered with roots to trip over. It was flooded and muddy, with rain still flowing across it in spots. But he was thinner and more agile than most of the Jeon guards. If he broke free, going left and down would carry him fastest toward neutral ground. The rope sat warm on his wrists, still not biting because of the careful way Jungkook had wrapped it. If he turned his hands, just so, the wet cord would give him another finger's worth. Namjoon's voice rang in his head. Left boot, hilt forward. The knife waited. He'd only need one clean chance. The park lieutenant's grin didn't reach his eyes. He shifted his weight, chin tipping backwards while fingers drummed on the hilt of his sword. Again, Jimin read the sign. There were at least 5 more. When Jimin tuned his hearing, he could hear them now in the underbrush, a breath deeply inhaled, a heel slipping on needles, the wet whisper of leather on bark, all holding for the signal. Jungkook didn't turn his head, but Jimin saw his jaw tense. He gave a low hand sign and shields raised around them. No blades, not yet. Jungkook's palm closed on the rope at Jimin's wrists. Not a jerk, but a reminder of his state. Jimin waited for the next moment to take shape, alert always. "Thin is enough to take you 3, Jungkook said. "Last warning." The lieutenant's lip curled. "Then take us." It came out of nowhere. Not a charge, more like a lean in. 2 park scouts slid into sight, shoulders low, testing. Jeon's shields met them and held. Wood on bone. The thud landed in the pit of Jimin's stomach. Breath grunted out of bodies, but they refused to fall. During the distraction, a park hand reached for Jimin's sleeve from behind him. Jimin didn't flinch. He let the fingers brush across the rope, but it was close enough to make Jungkook react. He spun, and his hand came down over the grasping wrist. With a swift motion, he turned aside. No pain, no spectacle. The scout stumbled, caught himself, and hissed. The ring of Jeon's scouts around him tightened. Jimin shifted half a step with the movement, already mapping out where his body would go when the moment cracked. Hands together, rope low, pivot on the ball of the right foot. Left and down. The run of water would make the slope treacherous, and he'd have to let momentum take him rather than navigate it himself. On the positive side, the rain would wash away much of his scent. Another park wolf crowded in, eager, eyes on the rope. A Jeon shield kissed his ribs, enough to warn, not break, so he came again, angrier. Good, Jimin thought. Angry men made gaps. Jungkook's voice stayed low. Guard that chest, and keep the prisoner with me. Jimin clocked it then. Jungkook wasn't aiming to break anyone. No kill orders, no gleam of steel, just bumps against shields that might leave bruising, but no blood. He was squeezing the fight smaller until it had nowhere left to go but away. The Jeon line shifted left in one piece, shields touching, knees bent. The park lieutenant paced them on the outside, eyes locked on Jimin. Now, he breathed, not to Jimin this time, but to the trees. They answered. 2 more shapes slipped out of pine, one to either side, making the ridge feel even narrower than it was. A whistle, high and thin, threaded the rain. The push came harder, not quite a crash, but all elbows and the creak of wet leather. A Jeon guard's heel found nothing where ground should have been. He windmilled, then recovered, cursing softly. The ring around them flexed with emotion. There, Jimin thought. Got it. A seam Jimin could feel more than see, opening and closing as the bodies tried to realign. He shifted to set his weight and waited for the next lean. He let his wrists turn inside the wet rope, searching for that extra finger's worth of space Jungkook had given him earlier. It came small, real. Don't, Jungkook said. But the words weren't to the park wolf attacking. They were to him. Jimin felt it in the way the word landed. Jungkook's breath, low and close. Said quietly, not meant to be heard beyond the length of the rope. Jungkook's gaze dropped once to Jimin's left boot, then rose and caught his eyes. For a breath the ridge, the rain, and the chaos around them fell away. He's beautiful, Jimin thought, blindsided by the clarity of it. Rain jeweled on Jungkook's lashes, and his mouth held steady. No swagger, just authority that didn't need a shout. Fair. He had kept the fight small, kept steel sheathed, kept Jimin warm and breathing and treated like an equal since his capture. Jimin admired him for it, with an ache that felt dangerous. But the world wasn't fair, and neither were councils that ruled their pacts. Jimin was Park. Whatever this was, this expansive feeling in his chest, whenever Jungkook was near, it couldn't be allowed to choose for him. He was already halfway to gone. Even the slightest whisper, and he'd crack. He needed a way before that could happen. Jungkook's fingers tightened once on the rope. Not a jerk, a plea. Please. The wolf reached anyway. Jimin's hand shifted, fingers angling toward leather, the old habit waking in his muscles. Everything stacked, weight, angle, noise, hope, and Jimin felt the world teeter on the edge of its own breath. Lightning chose then. The ridge flashed white, sound arriving a heartbeat late like the sky had torn open. The shock hit them in the chest. Air punched out of lungs. The ground shuddered when a pine farther up the slope took the strike, splitting it to the core. The Jeon defensive line broke, not from fear but physics. A shield slipped. A boot skated through the mud. The precious evidence chest where the forged note lay lurched, then steadied. The world tilted just enough to make even agile men clumsy. The rope at Jimin's wrist snagged on a jut of bark, bit, then slackened. Not free, but looser. A Jeon hand reached and missed him by a finger's width. Jungkook's forearm slid in front of him on instinct, catching Jimin at the waist as the path skated out from under his boots. "Steady," he said, voice low. His hand left as soon as it landed, like he didn't want to touch without permission, even to help. Their eyes met. One breath, one plea. The moment stilled. I want him. Which is why when the opening Jimin had seen earlier appeared again, he didn't hesitate. He took it, left and down, where the water ran. He let gravity do half the work. Knees soft, feet quick, concentrating to avoid any obstacles in his path. He did not look back to see if he was being chased. Looking back cost breaths and time, and possibly his heart. Shouts skidded after him as he fled. A whistle echoed in the trees. Another park signal, but too far right to help him now. That was fine. He was better off alone now. Get free first, then deal with the consequences. He pumped his arms and ran faster. The neutral zone, ground free from control of either pack, lived somewhere between border stones and good faith. He felt that when the air changed, less Jeon, less park, more storm. The path flattened by a low outcrop, stone thrusting out of the hillside like a shoulder. He pressed his back to it and breathed. Rope still on, wrists burning, heart loud. He stayed tucked under the rock lip until his breathing calmed. Across the forest, the rain eased from hammer to hiss, then to a fine mist that hung in the trees and soaked the world through. He checked what the slope had done to him. Wrists raw where the rope had burned, a scrape high on his cheekbone, mud up to the knee. He turned his hands so he could reach the knife in his boot and set about the arduous task of slicing through the rope to free himself. As he did, he listened. No horns, no baying, no metal on metal or boots through leaves. Once, far off, a park whistle rose and fell, but he didn't answer. Not yet. He would not be returned anywhere. He would walk in under his own command and ask his own questions when he got there. The forest smelled like wet leaves and mud. Jimin kept his own cedar scent tamped down, breath after breath. The Wainam June had drilled him. In through the nose, count 4. Hold. Out through the mouth, count 6. Hold. Again. Alpha scent could betray you long before footfalls did. He used to waiting. He mapped routes across the forest in his head as he tried to figure out the safest route back. The old charcoal cut that paralleled the ridge, the dry ditch that would take him toward the border stones. The low run where water loved to travel and would pull sin away from men with good noses. A large portion of being the Black Swan involved traveling unseen, so he knew them all. When the rain truly stopped, cold crept in with teeth. He flexed his fingers until warmth tingled back. He thought, traitorously, of a travel kettle and a voice that poured tea as if it were strategy. He pictured lashes jeweled with rain and a little more just below a pair of pretty pink lips. The thought brought the kind of heat he didn't want. Home first. He needed to find out who had betrayed him. Light thinned by degrees, the way it does in the hills. Silver to pewter to the soft dark that makes every tree trunk look like a possible threat until eyes adjust. Wind shifted. Somewhere to his right, water found a new path and chattered softly down it. The forest heartbeat slowed as evening descended into night. He waited until proper night, just not the storm cloud's version, and then waited one longer for good measure. Patience kept men alive. Pride got them found, pale as it was. He was confident the moonlight would guide his path like an old friend. When he finally left the outcrop, he moved like water, soft steps, knees loose, weight placed where a running animal would put it. He aimed for the dry ditch. Then he'd make for the charcoal cut beyond it. He was certain he was on neutral ground, but it wouldn't be until he hit the line of standing stones that marked the start of park territory that it would be impossible for him to be called a trespasser. The autumn forest was cold and quiet in the way that set Jimin's teeth on edge. No rustle of patrols, no distant signals, which was good, but also no noise that might cover up the shuffle of his own footsteps. All around him was just the smell of damp earth and the sharp scent of pine. He didn't regret that he'd lost his scouts, because it was far easier to keep unseen if you traveled alone, but now the silence stretched around him like a threat. Until a branch snapped. He spun, the hair on his neck already prickling, and froze when the figure stepped out of the shadows. Broad shoulders, the glint of a steel sword hanging from the leather belt that hugged the trim waist. Familiar cocky gait and the unmistakable, intoxicating scent. Jungkook. Lost your little soldiers, Alpha? Jungkook's smirk was visible even in the pale moonlight. Jimin scoffed, baring his teeth. Better lost than skulking behind trees like a coward, Jeon. How long have you been waiting there for me? Jungkook didn't answer. The younger Alpha just tilted his head, circling Jimin with lazy menace. They'd danced this way long before Jimin had ended up in Jungkook's custody, in skirmishes, intense council meetings. Most recently at the bargaining table negotiating this very neutral zone between the kingdoms they were both illicitly standing in. It was almost a relief to slip into it, the old predator's cycle, weight on the balls of the feet, eyes steady, breath measured. This was a shape his body knew, the kind that let him file desire away and call the awareness in his body of Jungkook's every move focus. Always circling, never breaking. But here, alone beneath the trees, after all they'd been through, the air vibrated with something hotter than rivalry. You shouldn't be here. Jimin's voice was steady, though his pulse betrayed him. He lifted his chin higher, glaring defiantly at the Jeon Alpha. Neither should you. Jungkook shot back, stepping closer. Too close. Close enough that the scent of rain on his skin cut through the pine. But under that, something deeper bloomed. Sandalwood and amber. Heavy, heady, and, as Jimin knew from experience, almost impossible to ignore. Jimin forced himself not to move, not to flinch, even as the weight of Jungkook's scent pressed around him like a challenge. His spine stayed straight, chin tilted just enough to remind the other Alpha who he was dealing with. If Jungkook wanted him to falter, he'd be waiting a long time. Jungkook stopped circling first, as if refusing to turn Jimin into prey. I told you not to run, he said, voice low. His scent pressed close, steady, not taunting, just present. You got your distance. Did it help? It reminded me who I am, Jimin said, keeping his chin lifted, and who I answer to. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. Then answer this, he murmured. A forged dispatch dragged us to that river. Someone steered you onto the path that made you easy to take. Aren't you curious who sold you out? Curious was too soft a word for the thing twisting under Jimin's ribs, but he kept his expression neutral. Curiosity doesn't change the law of borders, he said, or the fact that you're not my Alpha. No, Jungkook agreed, a breath of a smile that wasn't triumph. I'm the one who pulled you out of that rope. Whoever set this up stabbed both you and me. I want a hand that did it. His eyes slid once to Jimin's wrists, then back. Walk with me back to the camp. Let me show you what I found. The original message, the evidence. If you aren't interested, then run if you still want to. Jimin held the look, refusing the pull in his chest that wanted to believe him, to trust him. Acting like predators was easier. You need not to give anything away that could be used against you later. You want a hostage, he said. Dress it in kindness if it helps you sleep. I want the truth, Jungkook said simply. And I would have thought you did too. The forest seemed to lean closer around them, waiting, then somewhere far off, the storm found its breath again. Thunder rumbled, and the heavens opened with sudden violence, rain hammering down through the canopy. Lightning split the sky as another ear-shattering clap of thunder echoed around them. Within seconds they were drenched, leather and linen clinging tight to their bodies. Jungkook swore under his breath and jerked his chin toward a rocky outcrop ahead. Shelter, unless you'd rather drown out here. Jungkook didn't wait for an answer. Typical. With fluid, predatory grace, he was already sprinting for the outcrop, rain plastering his dark hair flat. Jimin cursed under his breath, but followed. Pride was one thing, drowning in the mud another. The cave was shallow, the air close. Rain still hissed beyond the stone lip, but in here their scents tangled, sharp citrus and cedar from Jimin colliding with the heavy warmth of Jungkook's amber. He fought to keep his own signature scent reined in, forcing his breath steady, muscles locked. The last thing he needed was Jungkook realizing how badly his presence was affecting him. They stood shoulder to shoulder, icy water dripping from their hair, steam rising faintly where their heat fought the cold. "Don't tell me you're shaking," Jungkook murmured, voice lower now, rougher. "Wanted to keep you warm," he teased, his breath hot and entirely too close to Jimin's ear. Jimin huffed, refusing to turn his head. "Save your lines for someone desperate enough to fall for them." Jungkook scoffed. "What a disappointment. I thought you might be different, Park, but I guess you're just like every other alpha who hides behind their pride." He shifted closer, shoulder brushing Jimin's with deliberate weight, sparks skittering up his nerves. "Funny," Jimin shot back, voice low. "You smell exactly like every other alpha who wanted to break me, and failed." Silence thickened, as charged as the storm outside. Rain battered the stone lip of the cave, but inside the only sound was their breathing, uneven, heavy, and far too aware. Jimin's jaw ached from clenching it. He tipped his chin, exposing the elegant line of his neck with deliberate ease. A dare, not a weakness. Proof that Jungkook's presence didn't rattle him. If the Jeon Alpha thought he could intimidate him, he'd learn otherwise. But Jungkook's gaze betrayed him, flickering downward, catching on Jimin's lips before darting back up, the slip as telling as any touch. Jimin felt the change before he scented it, the amber deepening, thickening, laced now with something rawer, more dangerous. Attraction, desire. His pulse thrummed, sparks skittering through his veins, but he forced his expression to stay neutral, even as his own scent threatened to slip. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, dark and gleaming in the half-light. "Keep pretending if you want, but I can smell it, Park. You feel this as much as I do." His voice dropped, words barely audible over the storm outside. "You can lie with your words, but not with your scent." Jimin's breath caught, traitorous, but he held his ground, refusing to give the satisfaction of an answer. For once, Jungkook's smirk faltered. His gaze lingered, softer now, searching Jimin's face as if he could read the thoughts he kept locked away. His next words came quieter, almost an admission. "If things were different," Jungkook's words trailed off, unfinished, hanging in the damp air. Jimin's throat tightened. He didn't dare ask what the rest would have been. Didn't dare admit he wanted to know. Instead, he shifted a fraction closer, enough that their sleeves brushed, enough that the amber in Jungkook's scent surged thick and unguarded. For a breathless second, the storm outside ceased to matter. Jimin closed his eyes. Fool! He drew himself up instead, forcing the smoky cedarwood in his scent back down again. "Different doesn't exist in our world, Jeon. Not for those in our position." But the last word caught faintly in his throat, betraying the steadiness he tried to project. Jungkook would hear it. Alphas always did. For a long beat, Jungkook only stared at him, eyes dark and unreadable. Then, softer than the storm outside, he murmured, "It can if we make it." Jimin's chest tightened. He wanted to laugh, to scoff, but the sound never came. Because part of him, the part he buried deepest, wanted to believe him. Jimin didn't move at first, Jungkook didn't either. Then it happened, in the space between a blink and a choice. Jungkook's hand came up, slow and visible, stopping short of Jimin's jaw like a question. Jimin went very still. "Don't be a fool," said training. "Just this once," said the heat under his ribs. He searched Jungkook's face, but found no demand there, only a space being offered. The wanting hurt, but it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like choosing. Jimin tipped the smallest degree into it, a yes you could miss if you weren't looking. Their mouths met carefully. No demand, no claiming. Just heat and rain and the soft catch of breath. Sandalwood and warm amber wrapped Jimin's senses. His own cedar wanted to rise, and he let it, just this once, just long enough to answer. Jungkook's lips parted first in a quiet invitation. Jimin answered with a slow slide, then deeper, kissing like he meant to memorize the moment. The first brush of their tongues turned into pure heat. Jungkook's hand found the angle of Jimin's jaw, thumb gentle under his cheekbone, not steering, steadying. Jimin's fingers lifted to the collar of Jungkook's cloak, knuckles grazing wet skin, pulling him closer by a breath. Jimin chased the lower lip he'd been pretending not to look at all day and caught it, a soft bite that drew the faintest sound from Jungkook's throat. Jungkook answered with a deeper tilt and a sweep of tongue that tasted like rain and something that would be dangerous if either of them let it. Jimin let him in, then answered in kind, the kiss turning unguarded, wet and hungry as the two alphas fought for the sweetest dominance. When they finally broke, it was only far enough to breathe each other's air. Jungkook's forehead rested against his, both of them a little wrecked. Jimin felt the tremor in his own exhale and didn't hide it. Jungkook's thumb swept once along the corner of his mouth, reverent, like he was learning a new prayer. "Come back to my camp," Jungkook said, voice roughened by things he wasn't hiding anymore. "Let me keep you alive while we pull the thread." "I can't dash," he swallowed. "I can't just let you go back there and pretend nothing happened, that it's the same as before." Jimin's mouth curved, tender and pained. "You won't be pretending," he said. "But I can't go with you." Jungkook's brows pulled, not in anger but in fear, clean and uncomplicated. "Someone paid to have you taken. The forged dispatch used our patterns to get us to chase, but your patterns to ensure you were there. Whoever this is wanted you gone, Jimin. Not bargaining leverage, gone." "I know." Jimin kept his voice steady, even as the truth scraped tender. "Which is why I can't walk in at your heel and let Park Council hide behind outrage. I'm the Black Swan. If there's rot in my halls, I find it from the inside." He held Jungkook's gaze. "It's the only way I come back with answers that hold." Jungkook's hand, still warm against Jimin's jaw, moved to his wrists, thumb brushing next to the rope burns, as if he could take the bite from them by touch alone. "I hate that this is the part that makes sense," he said quietly. "It's the part that hurts," Jimin returned, voice just as soft. "But you taught me something today." He nodded toward the sheltering rock, toward the memory of a brazier and a chair pulled close instead of high. "Discipline isn't cruelty. Mercy isn't weakness. If I'm going to stand up in my house and name a traitor, I need to remember that." Jungkook breathed out, a shaky, almost laugh. "You were listening." "I was trying not to," Jimin admitted, and that earned him the smallest smile. It ached in his chest. Jungkook leaned in again, their foreheads touching, rain a steady curtain beyond the cave's lip. "Then promise me one thing," he murmured. "If you sense the knife again, if anything smells wrong, you run. You don't give them a second chance at your life." Jimin closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them into Jungkook's. "I promise," he said. "And you? Promise you won't turn me into prey." "I already did," Jungkook said. "I chose not to chase when you ran. I still have men to answer to for that, but it was my decision and they will respect it." Their mouths found each other once more, deeper, still careful. A kiss that felt like lighting a lamp and cupping it with both hands to protect the flame so it could grow. When they broke, Jungkook's thumb traced the line just under Jimin's lower lip, reverent. "Go," he said, though it cost him. "Find what's rotten. Bring it to light." "I will." Jimin stepped back one pace, then another, the storm's breath cool on his neck. "And when I'm done, I'll be waiting," Jungkook said, understanding the rest. "And I'll come when you call." Jimin nodded once, a vow shared between them, then turned into the night that would carry him home. The taste of sandalwood and rain stayed on his tongue, like a promise he wasn't ready to say out loud, but couldn't forget.
Thank you so much for listening. I know the world is a hard place right now, and I really hope this story brought a bit of comfort to your day. If you enjoyed the story, please remember to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new story is released. You can find the written version of this and all my stories on my Patreon for free at patreon.com/cjmoon. I love you, I purple you, Sarange.